Awesome. It's a fantastic looking trailer, Mauricio. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We're on twitch.tv/OPNoobs online, home of OPNoobs.com, PC gaming by PC gamers. Today, I have the great chance, and I hope I'm not going to mess this up, to interview Mauricio from Small Game Studio, having made recently released after a period of early access the Super Button soccer game that comes right out of Brazil. Mauricio, how you doing tonight?
Hi, Fred. Been a pleasure talking to you tonight, and thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, well, we're excited to talk to you. So you were telling me pre-interview that you are located close to Sao Paulo in a city that has 600,000 people in population approximately, and of the name I already forget.
Yeah, but it's not that easy
It's not
to
easy to
say
pronounce.
the name. Yeah, the name of the city is Sorocaba. It's something like a native Brazilian name. So even sometimes here in Brazil, it's hard to pronounce it too. So
Okay, fair enough. Then I don't feel bad. What does it mean? Does the city have the name of the city have some meaning?
yeah, I believe it has some meaning, but I must be honest that I forgot. But it's something like between reefs or something like that.
Awesome. And so you were telling me, we're just talking pre-interview. You were telling me a little bit about Brazil as a country that's up and coming in video game development, especially in the indie scene. And I'm curious to hear a little bit how you have positioned yourself in the industry. When did you get started, and kind of what motivated you to get going as a game
Yeah.
developer?
Yeah. Well, I've just turned 40 years old this last May, and I've been working with technology and software development since I was very young. My first job, my first employee was when I was 15 years old, working with software development for banks, and so I really started very young. But I always wanted to do games, but developing games here in Brazil was something that it was something that you couldn't even imagine to work with games here in Brazil. It was very difficult, really. And then I started working with traditional corporate software, and then back in 2005 I started doing some game development, some serious game development in the part time. And then back in 2010, I started working with games full time. And 2012, I started with three friends of mine, Ismail Game Studio, and since then we have released 19 games.
Oh
These
wow.
games, yeah, we have worked a lot with mobile in the past, and Super Button Soccer is our second Steam game.
And so what allowed for you guys to get into game development? You said that when you were 15, 20 years old, that was impossible. What made that change for Brazil?
Yeah, I believe, and we were talking about this pre-interview. Here in Brazil, the industry is very newborn. So when you take a look at most of the studios here, they have 10 years maximum that they are in the business, nah? And it was very hard to get to the tools. And for example, I always dreamed of building for consoles, but you didn't have any kind of access to SDKs and to development kits and debug kits. And even for PC, it was very difficult to publish your game. So you saw some people developing games here and having something like a local scene of distribution, but the rest of the world wouldn't even hear about the Brazilian games.
How
So in
how does
terms,
yeah how do they go about distributing in Brazil? I'm assuming now is they're all using Steam, Valve software Steam as well.
yeah, it is. And in many ways, Steam is a blessing here for Brazil, not only for distributing the games, but also I believe for teaching the consumer market the value of buying games. This was something that was very hard here in Brazil too, because the level of piracy that you had back in 4 or 5 years ago, it was very huge, and it is still a problem here. But when you had this combination that it was very difficult to distribute outside your country, and even your own consumer market, they were pirating your games, you couldn't stand a chance. So we do see, we do have some cases here of games that were considered in a way successes here in Brazil, but when you see the number of copies that the developers sold, and the amount of money that they got for that games, it's ridiculous. So it's changing,
Huh.
it seems very important in this process of getting the Brazilian studios to grow bigger.
And so I'm assuming that with Steam coming probably 5-10 years ago to Brazil and unlocking things for game developers in your country, I'm assuming after that started coming the issues as a game developer of everything that comes between marketing and localization, making sure that basically translating the game. And I see when we go on the forums for Super Button Soccers, you guys do a fine job in balancing between English and Portuguese. How do you go about that? Because the bulk of your audience is probably still in Brazil. Am I correct?
Yeah, you are. And this is also a challenge. And thanks for the for the compliment.
Yeah, no, it's true.
And
It's really well done. It feels like a professional, basically, yeah, localization of the game into the US. You feel like the game could have very been well made in California, and that's important.
well, thanks a lot for that. But in the case of Super Button Soccer, this is really a challenge because the traditional game of button soccer, it's physically played here in Brazil, is something that is very dear for all Brazilians, because most of us who grown
Yeah,
on the 80s and 90s, we played that game on physical boards with physical buttons.
that's awesome.
So when you take the marketing message for Brazil and for the rest of the world, is very different, because it wouldn't make sense for us to appeal for these emotional feelings and all these rememberings for other countries. Here in Brazil, if you see what we try to achieve with the marketing here, is this is the game that you played as you are when you were young, and now you can play with your kids, because we have a lot of that in the forums and all the events
Yeah.
that we go. We see people, kids playing with their parents or even with their granddaddies. So it's very fun to watch.
So
But outside Brazil, we try to talk with soccer fans,
yeah, but
right?
so let's take a step back first. Can you go about explaining what the game is all about, Mauricio? Mauricio?
Sure,
Yeah, can you tell us what
sure.
Yeah, can you go about somebody who's never played the game? What is it?
Yeah, sure. The game basically is a digital version, or a digital recreation, because the original version of the game is much more strategic, of a game that is very well known here in Brazil, called Button Soccer. Basically, the physical version of the game, you play with real buttons on a table, right? And you have two goals, and you have to push the buttons to score goals. With the digital recreation, we try to stay in the middle of a strategic game and an action game. When you take almost all of the soccer games that you have on Steam and on or in mobile, they go all way to action games. So, for example, most of the games, you only have one touch. You have to touch the ball and try to score the goals, and the turns are alternating between the two players. With Super Button Soccer, as it follows most of the rules that you have on the traditional board game, you have a much more strategic gameplay style. Then you really create your plays. You can, for example, you can put the ball to an attacker, and you have to take into consideration the buttons that you're gonna use on the defense. So we have a lot of different kind of buttons and different materials that you can build your team. So, for example, you can have a bigger button made of iron as your main defenseman. It's probably you won't score a goal with that button because it's very slow, but it's fantastic for using it almost as a goalie, because even if someone hits it hard, it won't move. It's bigger, and so you have to take all of this into consideration when you are building your team, and it impacts a lot how your play style are gonna be. For example, you can use small buttons made of rubber, and you can build a team with only with this kind of buttons. It's gonna be a very aggressive team, very fast, but your defense is gonna
It's
be
a bit weak.
very weak because of the way the buttons are built off. So it's much more strategic than just a game of, for example, a nice hockey game. Because sometimes people they compare with it. Oh, I saw something like that on a shopping mall. That games of air hockeys. It's definitely something not like that. It's much more strategic. For guys who come from Europe, and I know that you came from France.
Yeah.
There's a game in Europe, a traditional board
Baby
game
foot.
called, yeah, it's called Subotio, I think, and it is much more closer to Subotio than an air hockey game.
It's not the one with the handles.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, baby foot we call it.
Baby foot.
Yeah, I grew up with that. I used to play
Yeah.
baby foot. Yeah, so I definitely get the nostalgic touch, the nostalgic feel of it all. So is that you talk about the strategy and the depth of the strategy of the game? Do you feel like the video game very much respects the actual game as it used to be played?
Yeah, in a way, yes, and but we do have some feedbacks, and we are even thinking about having something more like a classic mode in the future, because we had to modify some rules for getting the game to play in a more action way, not only for Brazilians but also for the rest of the world. So, for example, in the traditional game, you do have a goalie that in the game it almost covers all the goal itself, so it's much harder to score a goal in the traditional game. In our game we removed the goalie and we put this new mechanic of getting a bigger button to do almost the function of the goalie, but it's not the goalie itself, because in the traditional game you can't score a goal with your goalie. Another thing that we really changed in the rule is that in the traditional game the ball can get out of bounds, and you have to put it back into play and all of that. But in our game, the ball it hits the sides and get back to the field. So it's much more action oriented, and this brings some newer strategies that you can only have on the digital version. For example, doing a goal, hitting the side, and then getting back to the field. So it's a little bit different, but we try to get a lot of things.
Did you get some pushback on that?
No, we didn't. In the beginning, yes. When we first showed the game, because the first display that we had of the game, it was on a consumer expo here in Brazil last October, and we were very experimental with the way we approached the game on that expo, and we were very open to feedback because no one tried to do a PC or console version of Button Soccer before. So we really were very open minded, and even if, for example, if the audience said, "Oh no, that game is horrible, don't do that," we wouldn't do it. So we were very very willing to see where it would lead. And the response was fantastic. Of course, some people approached us and said, "Well, that's not 100% real button soccer," but it was the vast minority of people who played the game. And even that people, most of the people get to us and say, "Okay, I see that is not very close to the real thing, but I understand why you did it, and it's for better. It's for getting a better experience." So people are understanding our proposal on that. And for Brazilians who are the most emotional attached to that, we put a lot of other things into the game. So we have, for example, we have collectible cards, and the way the cards are drawn and very close to the way that The collectible cards back in the 80s were drawn. So even if they are in a way missing the real experience, they get this this very emotional feelings from the other things in the game, and that's okay in the end.
And how close are you guys to your community now? I know the game's been in an early access for a while, and that tends to bring studios and communities closer together.
Yeah, we feel that the Super Button Soccer is by far the game that we have constructed more closely with the community, because we do have an intention. We are not calling it yet, but we do have an intention of trying to get this into something like an e-sport. And the
Yeah.
way that we feel is that esports, they are built. They are not. There's not something that we could just
Yeah,
getting the
is there
message around that this is an esport. We
is
have
there
to
a
have a
community? Yeah,
community.
is there a community?
Exactly.
Well, is there community driven? Absolutely.
Exactly.
We have some experience here at OPNoobs because we do host tournaments for indie studios, and the better the experience is always a lot stronger when the community gets behind it. And that takes a lot of effort. That takes a lot of work. And it's actually I'm glad you mentioned esports, because it's actually what kind of brought me to talk to you, to ask you over email if you jump on Twitch and do an interview with us, because you want to take this game to a competitive level. You like to see some tournaments happening. How do you guys go about that? What's your game plan?
Yeah, yeah. We have a very close relationship, and it's very dear to our heart, this expo that I was telling you, Brazil Game Show, because it was the first showing of the game, and it was when we really felt that it could be an esport, because we have at the beginning of the expo itself, it was a 5 days expo, and the first day we were just showing the game, and there were lines of people wanting to play the game, and it was very surprising for us, to be very honest with you.
Yeah,
And then
that's awesome.
we had this click, like, okay, let's try to get let's start to organize some tournaments. And they were very, it wasn't very unorganized. We didn't have the structure for doing the tournaments. Basically, we got some sheets of paper and started taking the names of the people who wanted to play,
Yeah.
and starting doing playoffs. And okay, that's the championship. And to very yeah, yeah,
It's
it is
funny.
indie
Yeah.
indie game, my friend, indie game development. That's what it's all about. So
Freestyle. I
it's
like it.
freestyle. And basically, in the last day, the thing was so intense, and these tournaments, they were so intense that we had our first partnership in a way, and our first supporters, because we do have some friendship with the Razer team here in Brazil, and they donated
Oh, that's awesome.
five. Yeah, they donated 5 prizes for the last day. So in the last day, we did have the first prized tournament of Super Button Soccer, and it was fantastic. And then we okay.
How do you guys establish that connection with Razer?
Yeah, we are longtime friends, because the main, I don't know if he's CEO or the owner of the branch here in Brazil. I believe he's the owner or something like a distributor here in Brazil. He's a longtime friend of mine. And basically, what I did, I put shame aside, and they also had a booth. So I approached him, and I took some videos and some photos from the past day, from
Yeah.
the earlier day, and take a look at what happened in our booth yesterday. And of course, our booth was very small, and they had this huge arena from Hazer at the event, and we had that very humble booth of ours. But I took some pictures, and I showed him, and okay, take a look at this line, take a look at people wanting and people cheering at the game. And then I convinced him to get this 5 prizes. It was not that huge prize. It was, I believe it was 4 mouse pads and 1 mouse. But
But so your tournaments are mostly is there actually in physical places? You guys will get somewhere and bring the community around you to play the game and
yeah,
compete.
yeah, basically it is. And that's why I was telling you that we have this attachment to BGS, to Brazil Game Show, because our plan right now is we have just released the game. The game was out last Wednesday,
Yeah.
and our game plan from now on is we want to do some online tournaments, but we are working hard to try to see if we can get something like Brazilian national button soccer tournament happening on BGS, something like the finals there, because we want to do the first online matches and online tournaments. There are going to be qualifiers for this national tournament happening in Brazil in BGS, because BGS has a lot of exposure here in Brazil. There are a lot of people participating. Consumers go there. It's I believe right now is the third biggest consumer expo in the world, and it's growing. It's by far the biggest in Latin America, and people all over Brazil, they come to the expo to play games, and it's very interesting to see that many people go there. Of course, they go there to play the latest releases on PS4 and Xbox One. But we are starting to see Brazilian indie scene getting stronger enough to getting attention for players. Last year, there were a lot of people who went to our booths and to other Brazilian indie studios booths and saying that we like your games better than the
Yeah.
biggest ones, because
I believe
you have innovation. So it's something that really made us happy last year.
Yeah, and also your game has probably has characters that resonates in the Brazilian soul. It's something
Yeah.
that the nostalgia effect of games can be can have a tremendous impact on us as gamers. I personally feel like the games that hit bring back a lot of memories of when I was a kid. I completely sink myself into. So I can definitely understand why you'd have a big crowd of followers that love what you're doing. And yeah, it's the big stuff that's coming out of studios from, well, mainstream gaming. A lot of it is fantastic, but there's also a scary amount of recipes that come out on a monthly basis that I believe, especially the PC gaming audience, is growing tired of, and they want innovation. And the indie scene is doing just that. I think in the United States and in Europe, we've already grown accustomed to 2 dozen indie games coming out weekly, if not more than that, on Steam. But the fact that you have all of Brazil and other countries in Latin America on the move and catching up and about to release some of their talent onto our platform is thrilling for us. We've talked to a couple studios from Brazil this year, actually, with a very similar background in many ways to yours. And there's a lot of energy, at least from what I can tell. There's a lot of energy coming out of Brazil, and I'm kind of excited to see where you guys take the industry in the next 10 years. Do you think gaming is going to be a big deal for the Brazilian economy, basically, or am I too ambitious and idealistic?
Yeah, I hope so. We definitely hope so, and we are one thing that I can really say that we are everyone here works very hard, and there's a thing that we always say here in Brazil is something like everyone in Brazil is indie. There's not yeah, there's not one big studio in Brazil. So not anymore. Back in time, we used to have an EA studio here in Brazil, and we
Okay.
also had a Ubisoft development studio here in Brazil, but they are not here anymore. So basically, everyone who works with game development here in Brazil right now, they are indie. And there are many challenges in working with games here in Brazil, going from the way the population in general, they perceive games, because there's a lot of people thinking that games are not culture, not art, not forms of art, and the financial challenges here in Brazil too, and the piracy. But the way that we are approaching this is not something like, oh, poor Brazilians, we won't do that. We won't succeed because there are that many challenges.
Yeah.
But the way we are approaching is, okay, we know it's hard, so let's get together and try to solve this puzzle together. And there's a lot of union here. If you come to an event here in Brazil, be it a big consumer event like BGS, or be an industry event like Big, which happened last month, you can see that there is this need of getting together and trying to associate with other studios and doing things in cooperation. There's not that much competition between studios here in Brazil. So you see all the time other studios talking about your game, or some artists, for example, from one studio helping other studios get the game finished. I believe it's much closer to what you see, for example, in some indie game development cities like Vancouver. I see all the time people talking about Vancouver and all the indie studios that are getting together and making games together. I believe here in Brazil is almost the same phenomenon. So when we get to a new release of a Brazilian game, it's almost like all the other studios, they are happy for the success for
Yeah.
these other games, and everyone is helping with marketing, and almost like we have everyone publishing at each other games too.
So when you go into conventions, Mauricio, like conventions, events, where there's a celebration of gaming, basically, and you see a lot of other, you probably meet, you meet a lot of young developers trying to get into the industries. They know how to code games,
Yeah.
and you have 10, 15, 20 years of experience in game development, so you're probably a lot more advanced and you understand the market globally, how to approach it. Would you say that I can't help but think that that's a barrier, the current difficulties that young Brazilian developers have in selling their games beyond the Brazilian borders. It's not going to last. I'm assuming that Brazil is going to build the infrastructure for young developers to translate their games, sell them on Steam, make sure that the market is just as open to them as it is for other countries. Do you feel like, are you as optimistic as I am?
Yes, I am. I feel that we are, in a way, we are closing the gap, because we don't see many people who have something like 20 or 30 years of experience in the game development industry. It's not something like when you go to GDC or you go to a Game
Yeah.
Connection, you talk to someone. I have for example, I've met a guy from the UK last time I went to Game Connection Europe, and I was talking to him, and he was producer of RoboCop from Ocean, which I played on my Sinclair back in the beginning of the 80s. So he has 30 years of experience, and he has gone a lot of pain in the past of what to do and what not to do. And here in Brazil, even the most experienced people in the industry, they have 10, 12, 15 years maximum, not only as a company but also as a professional. So I believe we have this something like 10 or 15 years of difference of experience, but we are closing the gap very fast. You see some works from very young people. I do know people who on their very first game here in Brazil, they did something like almost masterpieces, and you take a look at that, and you see that this person has a lot of future.
And is that person capable of selling his game on Steam in the United States, on Steam in Germany, on Steam in France? I'm assuming not, and it's probably a shame, because I can't help but notice we scan the indie games on a daily basis. Just because we do a lot of game reviews, and we try to cover as many games as possible, and I can't help but feel like all the indie games are coming out from the US and Europe, and you're telling me about, and from time to time we see that masterpiece that you talk about from a foreign country like Brazil, that brings a whole new style and a whole new flair and ambiance to a game, but we see them so infrequently. It's seldom, it's maybe once every couple months. um,
Yeah,
are these young developers struggling to get their games across?
yeah, I think so. I think this is a very good point that you brought up, because I believe there are some very good, at least here in Brazil, the scene that I am more accustomed to. I believe there's a lot of very good developers, but that sometimes they lack this business mentality.
Yeah.
And in the specific case of Brazil, I believe that there are a lot of developers here that they still fear that they have the whole road for them ahead. Because, for example, if you take a look at just a quick example, if you take a look at this War of Mine from 11 bits,
Yeah. Yeah,
uh, it,
exactly.
it doesn't matter if it's from Poland or Brazil or Argentina, because it's such a
Universal.
global, yeah, it's an universal message that they are transmitting. So here in Brazil, I still see some studios having this unjustified fear of going global and trying to sell their product, and it doesn't matter if you're from Brazil or not. If the game is good, the game is good, and people are gonna buy it everywhere in the world. And but that is something that is really changing also, because I believe most of the reason that we had this fear is that unfortunately Brazil is not a country that used to have a lot of contact with other countries in the world.
Yeah.
When I take a look at example Europe, even the concept of nation is very different, because you take a train in 4 hours, you are over the borders, and you are in other country with
Yeah,
other
no,
language and other culture. But here
it's
in
not
Brazil,
like that for Brazil. Yeah, you're a big country.
we are very isolated. So it's something that unfortunately, even for language, there's a lot of barriers in the term that most of Brazilians, they don't speak English very well, or even Spanish, and they don't have this cultural exchange with other countries. But that is changing a lot, because there's a lot of
And
things
yet,
happening
and yet,
in the game development scene, because there are a lot of people from other countries coming to Brazil and going to expos, going to conferences,
yeah.
and people are starting to lose this fear. They are not afraid anymore.
Yeah, and yet what's surprising to me is that even though they don't have this access to foreign countries, they have access to obviously a computer since they're developing a game, the internet. I mean, it's hard to believe that that's such a barrier nowadays, because I personally feel like there is such a easy way to communicate between one another. We're sent each other. I mean, this interview is the living proof of that, in the sense that we sent each other an email, we get on Skype, and voila, boom, nothing less, nothing more. So I think I'm hoping you're right that all this energy is going to come over, because I'd be very excited to see a lot more from Brazil. Getting back into Super Button Soccer, what's next for you guys? Where do you take it from there? I know the game's released now. Do you move on, or do you continue updating the game? Do you bring more patches? Do you stay committed to it?
Yeah, we have a lot of plans for the future for the game right now. One of those plans is to having this tournament on BGS. BGS this year is gonna happen on September. Yes, it's September. So we do have a road ahead for getting to this national, the Super Button Soccer tournament that we are dreaming about. In the meantime, we do have some other tournaments that we are starting to schedule. We do have an experimental tournament that we are going to run inside a college.
Nice,
Here in our city, we do have a very good partnership with a
nice.
college, an engineering college here in our city. We're going to run a tournament there to get the hang of running a physical tournament and see what goes wrong. So we get very right when we run the tournaments on BGS. In terms of the game itself, the game has this appeal for collectible cards. So we already have some content planned for the next weeks. Our plan is to try to get some new content every week to the game.
Wow.
So, for example, we do have the Summer Olympics happening in Rio next
Yeah.
month, and we want to do some exclusive, time limited exclusives. For example, with the game, with the national teams that are gonna play in the soccer tournament in the Summer Olympics, we're gonna have some cards for that. We are also willing to bring some more games attached to Brazilian teams, to Brazilian soccer teams, and also to other traditional European and North America soccer teams. And we are fixing some bugs because we had a very, I wouldn't say a very long early access period, but we did launch the game on early access on January, so we had something like 6 to 7 months of testing. But even with that, when the game was full released, we did have some very specific issues with some Linux distributions and with Windows 7, which we didn't test with Windows 7. I wouldn't know. I wouldn't really believe that someone still uses Windows 7, but yeah,
Yeah.
they do.
Yeah. Some of us are stickler.
Yeah, so we did have some issues with that, and we were fixing bugs. But in terms of content, it's basically where the game's gonna be headed off. We're gonna release some new cards with new stadiums, new balls, new soccer players, new logos, and all that stuff.
Who does the design on the game? Because the game looks great.
Oh, thanks again. And it's all internal. It's all internal. Everything that you see in terms of everything, of code and art and animations is done by our internal team.
Yeah, well, they're doing a fine job. It looks absolutely very polished, very nice.
Thanks a lot.
Are you also, just a quick last few questions? I don't want to take too much of your time, Mauricio, but a quick last few questions about the community itself. Are you also finding that maybe through early access, you've come to know a few guys in the community that may be more influential in the way your player base is following the game?
Yes, definitely yes. And if there's something that I really recommend for everyone is the early access experience. It's something that we thought about not having an early access, and now I'm very happy that we chose to run the game very early on the early access, because the first version of the game, it wasn't even near complete. It was very alpha stage of the game, but we really feel that we have built a game with our players and with our community. We do have some players that right now I consider them my friends, because with
Nice.
Steam, all this community, Steam is very community driven. So a lot of people, a lot of players, they knew the game from BGS, from this event, and they started following our social media and our channels, and they have bought the game from day one on early access, and they sent us some friends invitation on Steam, and we started to play every day with these
That's
guys.
awesome.
And the number of feedback they brought into the game, there are, I don't have no problem assuming and saying that a lot of things that are in the game right now, they came from the community. It's
I'm
ideas.
not surprised.
Those ideas were not ours. Those ideas were all from the community. So it's very fun to build a game and seeing a lot of people believing in the game and having this very same kind of passion that we have when we built the games. It's really an exciting feeling.
Are you guys going to try to develop to launch the games on other platforms?
Yeah, we are thinking about releasing the game on consoles, and almost every day someone asks if the game is gonna come to mobile too.
Yeah.
I don't know, for mobile is something that we had a lot of doubts of moving the game to mobile, because right now the game for running on smartphones is gonna need a lot of scaling down of what we did with the game. So I don't think that it's gonna be the same experience for mobile right now. So it's something that we are still thinking about. But for consoles, it's something that, who knows, maybe the next version of the game can come to PS4 and Xbox One. It's something that we are working on that.
Okay, awesome, great. And do you guys have in mind any other game for the future? You seem to be releasing quite a few games on a regular basis, but PC being the first one that this being the first one really that to come out on PC. Are you guys going to keep exploring PC as a platform moving forward for maybe other games as well?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because right now we are focusing a lot on Super Button Soccer, because the way that we work as a studio in the past years is that we developed a lot of things simultaneously. So it's
Yeah.
it's 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 very intense. And for Super Button Soccer, we decided to go the other way and focusing 100% of the team in
On the
just one
product.
game. Exactly. So we are still focused on Super Button Soccer. We're not thinking about other games right now. But myself, I have always this itch of working,
Yeah.
and I'm helping with another game that probably is gonna be released on Steam by the end of the year, and it's gonna be a puzzle platform. Basically, it's a friend of mine who approached me, and he wanted to bring this game to Steam, and he wanted some help. And in a way, the because I am producer of Super Button Soccer,
Yeah.
and right now most of the work to be done on Super Button Soccer is almost it's simpler work right now. So it's basically content and bug fixing. So I have some more.
Frees up some of
Yeah,
your time. Yeah.
yeah. So I was willing to rest a little, but then
Yeah. It's August.
came this calling, and my friend wanted some help. So why not?
Yeah, well, if you had a, usually I ask the developers what type of gamers themselves are, and I kind of forgot to ask you what type of a gamer are you, Mauricio? Like, what games do you play typically?
Yeah, I play a lot of games in a lot of platforms, but I have a deep passion for portable, for both 3DS and Vita
Yeah,
games. I love portable games because I am always on the move, and because of that, I don't have much free time for playing, for sitting, for example, on a console. And I love RPGs, and so I don't have the time. And at the same time, there are some fantastic RPGs on portable consoles. So I love, for example, Disgaea. I love Persona.
yes,
I love all that games that come JRPGs
from
for
the Asian
portable
markets.
consoles.
Yeah.
Exactly. And on PC, I have an addition to Hearthstone. I love
Yeah.
Hearthstone. And sometimes when I want some very quick gameplay, I also love to risers. It's
Okay.
when I have 5 minutes a break time there, I do a very quick play of Love to Risers. I love that game.
Come to think of it, it's not surprising that you like Hearthstone because Super Button Soccer, for some reason, kind of, I don't know if graphically or just how polished and everything is very shiny, that has that Hearthstone feel.
I really appreciate that, and yes, because there are some artists involved in the game, and the guy who did all the drawings for all the arts for the stadiums, he's also a Hearthstone,
Addict.
as matter
Okay.
of fact, a Blizzard fan overall, and he loves Diablo, he loves Hearthstone. So there are some Hearthstone touches in the way that the stadiums are illustrated. Yes, it
But
is.
yeah, it looks awesome. Mauricio,
Thanks a lot.
no, thank you for taking the time to talk to us. We will keep an eye out for this game in its development and whatever else you guys do. If we can lend a hand, we're spread across the US. We have some people in Europe. If we can ever help you with anything, just please reach out. You have my email address. I'll be sending you the link to the interview in just a couple of days as we get it up. I want to thank everybody for watching. You'll find the interview on OPNoobs.com and as well as on iTunes and YouTube. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Mauricio, do you have any last words before we close the interview?
Oh, well, again, I'd like to really, really thank you for the invitation and the opportunity of talking here to your audience. And for everyone who's watching and listening, take a look at the game. The main site for the game is superbuttonsoccer.com. And we also, if you look for Super Button Soccer on Steam, you're gonna find there. So it's gonna be a pleasure. And if you see me online, just let's play some matches. It would be
Awesome.
it will be a
I will.
pleasure.
I'm very passionate though, so we might not end up being friends after the games.
Yeah.
I'm a passionate soccer
we
fan.
will, we will, we will.
I was
Soccer unite people, man.
Yeah, I was actually I went to a French bar just to watch the final of the Euro Cup. I thought we'd beat Portugal, and Portugal beat us at the very last minute. It was a tough death sentence. So,
I must admit that my grandfather he's Portuguese. He was Portuguese, so I really rooted for Portugal. Sorry
yeah,
about
it's okay. I forgive you. I'm over it. Thanks a lot, Mauricio. Max, you can take us out. You guys have a great night.